It is that time again. NFL predictions time. We are going full circle from how we started this podcast last year and ready to get you ready for the NFL season once again. Stay tuned to see who we think the elite teams are, the terrible teams, the teams that will surprise, and everything else in between here on episode number 6 of the MW Sports Show. All right, so if you don't remember how we did this prediction episode last year, we start by going through each division. And one little change here for this year. Last year we did it the best team to the worst team. This year we will do it the worst team to the best team. So go worst to best this year through each division. So that's slightly different. But other than that, we will be doing that the same. And then we'll go through our playoff predictions and, of course, who we think will win Super Bowl 59. So let's start here with the AFC East. Mr. W, how do you think this division will shake out?
The AFC East should be more interesting than it was last year. More like we thought it might be last year. Obviously, it's three teams deep, three teams that could win it: the Dolphins, the Bills, and last year's big disappointment, the New York Jets. The Patriots, of course, are still struggling to find themselves post Belichick. Still unsure of just about everything they got going on. So I think they're a pretty solid pick for last place, especially in a division that features three teams that probably should make the playoffs. It gets tougher from there. It's three teams that all have pieces that they have yet to show, but also, at least two teams who have been at the top of this division for a few years now. With that said, I have the Jets finishing third. I think that while they could live up to their potential, they have a very poetic and New York Jetsy way of failing to do so. I don't know how well Rodgers can play coming back from injury again, and if he can even stay healthy throughout the year. Second, I have the Buffalo Bills. I think that they are a team that has been solid in the regular season for the last few years, and obviously they have a really good quarterback who can really sling it. But I think that the Miami Dolphins are a better overall team. I think that just another year in that system will make Tua even better. It just feels like a Miami team that has a lot more pieces than Buffalo.
Yeah, certainly in the AFC East, those top three teams, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. The Patriots, well, I could certainly see the Patriots improve a little. Of course, drafting Drake May, they hope he's their quarterback of the future. I think he could show some signs this year, and obviously they have a solid defense, but it feels like, as you said, it'll just take a few years for them to develop into a true contender. But I am going to have to disagree with you on maybe those top three, but I actually have the Dolphins all the way up at third. I think in some ways they could be the most talented team in this division. Obviously, they have a good quarterback in Tua. They got some great receivers, talented defense, good across the board. But I just worry that if they're not like 9-3, 10-2, as we've seen come December, we've seen them blow it in December before, and I certainly don't know if Tua is the QB that I trust in those late games. So I have them all the way down at third. In second, I have the Bills, the sixth seed in the AFC. Obviously, for the Bills, it comes down to they have Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the game. So, they're automatically going to be a contender just because of that. They obviously lost Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, some key pieces like that. So, Josh Allen, he's had to do it before, carry the team, but so that's why I have them in the playoffs. But it could be a bit of a shaky ride with some of the limited receivers there in Buffalo, as it usually turns out to be. And then in first place in the AFC East, I have the New York Jets. Obviously, a bit of a risk here with Rodgers coming back from the injury, the Achilles injury. Obviously, I think the biggest thing for the Jets is that they had one of the worst quarterback situations in the league last year. and they still won 7 games. So I think that with competent quarterback play, which I still trust Rodgers to do, that they should certainly be in the mix for the playoffs at bare minimum. Obviously, they also have one of the greatest defenses in the league. So that if I think that if Rodgers can get anywhere close to the MVP form that we've seen, I think they could be very dangerous. And I have them as the 4 seed in the AFC. All right, so let's move on to the AFC North. This could be the most intriguing division, with all teams potentially being in playoff contention. With that being said, obviously it's tough for every team in one division to make the playoffs. So I think it could be a bit of a tough ride for at least one, maybe two of the teams in this division. So, with that being said, I have the Cleveland Browns in last place, and I mean they have a talented roster, but what it really comes down to is Deshaun Watson even a good quarterback at this time? Because I mean, we really haven't seen it for a while, and I mean the other thing with the Browns is they're kind of like the Jets, as you said, although I with Aaron Rodgers, I think that could go differently. But like historically, they're one of the teams that it can be hard to trust. So I have them taking a bit of a step back this year. In third place, I have the Steelers. This one is fairly self explanatory. They usually end up right around that 9 win mark, which, especially in a good division like this one, is a safe bet for third. Obviously, if the Browns ended up being good, it could even be last, but I think they'll get third. I think Russell Wilson at the end of the day is an upgrade from whatever their quarterback situation was last year, and I think that he can keep their winning season streak going. But I just don't think they are like quite as competitive to be like a true playoff threat, and I do have them just missing out on the playoffs. So yeah. In second place, I have the Ravens as the 5 seed. The Ravens had one of the best records last year, the 13-4 mark in the regular season. Actually, it might have been they were the only team with that record, if I remember correctly. Of course, Lamar won MVP. But the reason why I don't have them in first, as we saw with the first time you won the MVP in 2019, the Ravens dropped a little down to earth the next year. They still were a playoff team, so that's why I think they could certainly make the playoffs this year. But I think they will be a little less productive. I don't think you'll see quite the same dominance out of this Ravens team that you saw a year ago. They'll still be a good team. So that means in first place, I have going from fourth to first the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think they will be the 3 seed in the AFC. Obviously, this one, similar to the Jets, comes down to if Joe Burrow can stay healthy for the entire season. But I think it's a pretty easy path for them to go from last to first, because while I don't really think there are a ton of weaknesses in this division, like I think the Browns could be last at 7-10 or 8-9, or someone could be last at 7-10, 8-9. I also don't see one team that particularly stands out. Now, some of you might say the Ravens, but I do think they'll drop down a little back to earth after what happened last year. I think all 4 teams in this division will be within a few games of each other. So I think the Bengals have a pretty good path to, as long as Joe Burrow stays healthy, go from fourth to first.
Yeah, I got to agree with a lot of that. This is a division that's going to be pretty tight. That has, I feel like, 2 classes of teams within that. However, I have the Steelers finishing last. Not because I don't think that they will win 7 or more games, but because I have very little faith in Russell Wilson adapting to Mike Tomlin. It is tough to put a Mike Tomlin team fourth. I don't believe in Russell Wilson. I don't believe in that team. I think that it's a team that might even, will probably take a step backwards. That said, in third place, I have the Cleveland Browns. who will also take a step back, not as dramatically. I think Deshaun Watson will start to find his footing in Cleveland. I think he'll return to some version of that Deshaun Watson we've seen in the past. And it's a team that is yet to really see what it's like with a full season of him. That said, he is coming off a season-ending injury to his surgery, rather, to his throwing shoulder, which will probably limit him, limit his abilities, especially with his big throws, his downfield abilities that made him so special in Houston. So I think that they'll just miss out on the playoffs, maybe an 8 seed, maybe a 9. In 7th in the conference and 2nd in the division, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, obviously, they still have Lamar Jackson, the MVP. It's a Baltimore team that, for the last few years, has been really consistent and really solid. Obviously, they were the 1 seed last year. However, I think ultimately that the Bengals, as you said, will go fourth to first. I think that they're just inevitable. I don't feel like it's a Bengals team that's going to be crazy impressive to watch, but I feel like it's a Bengals team that's going to go out Sunday in, Sunday out, and just win football games. So I think that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to finish with that 3 seed.
Yeah, I think all four of those teams will be very competitive, and obviously we'll see how this division shakes out. But let's move on to the next division, the AFC South. I'll start with Mr. W. Who do you think, or how do you think this division will turn out?
Well, I'll start at the bottom. As much as I like Trevor Lawrence, as much as he's got great hair, I think they're going to finish last. I think maybe that's a bit harsh, but I just don't see them getting any better. I think that they've played the best version of their football in the past, and I think that you're going to start to see things go downhill in Jacksonville as they seem to often do. I think that the Colts are going to finish third. Um, it's Look, Anthony Richardson, I think, is good enough to get them out of the basement, but just doesn't feel like he's ready to do anything at an elite level at this point. The Tennessee Titans, I have finishing second. It's a team that doesn't have much in terms of star power. A team that is probably looking at a full season of Will Levis. So, and I think that they'll be one of those teams in football. You have them every year. One of those teams that just sort of finds their way to 500, and nobody really knows how they got there. But I think that's how I feel about the Titans. The Texans, I feel, have this division locked down. I don't think any of these teams could contend. I don't think that anyone will be able to slow down C.J. Stroud, much less stop him. I think that he is a player who is really going to take another step forward, perhaps in the way you saw that second half of the season, Jordan Love, even where once players just get more and more comfortable, the players like Love and Stroud who have that throwing ability, that natural strength and prowess, as they get more and more comfortable, they really start to know what they can and can't get away with. So I think as CJ Stroud really gets into the NFL and has had a full off season, having had a great rookie year, I think that this Houston Texans team is just way too good for anyone else in the division.
Yeah, the AFC South is, as usual, one of those teams, one of those divisions where it's hard to believe in a lot of the teams. I think the team that I might trust the least in the South is the Tennessee Titans. So unlike you having them at second, I have them down at fourth. Obviously, I think it'll be much tougher for them without Derrick Henry, with him going to the Ravens. Obviously, he was their best offensive player, their biggest weapon. It'll be tough. Well, it'll be impossible to replace him, and obviously very tough to get anywhere close to where they got with Derrick Henry. And while I could see Will Levis develop, I think you'd be wrong in saying this is anything but a rebuilding year for the Titans. Maybe they could surprise in some games, but I don't really trust them very much. In third, I have the Jaguars. I think, as you said, we saw probably the best of them a couple of years ago at this point. I'm not sure I trust Trevor Lawrence really anymore to take any more steps forward, even with that gray hair. Um, but yeah, really only had that one great stretch of games at the end of 2022. So I do think the Jags will fall short of expectations once again, but will avoid the basement in this division. In second, I have the Colts. Now, this is a team that I can actually see contend in the AFC South and possibly even the AFC as a whole, although I don't think they'll quite make the playoffs. I was impressed by what they did with Minshew last year. They were very close to making the playoffs, if not for a drop pass at the end of the Texans game. And I think Anthony Richardson can get them to where they were last year and possibly even further. And it just is a question if the Texans. So I do have the Texans at number one. It's just a question of will C.J. Stroud be nearly as good as what he was last year, and I think he will be. I definitely do. It certainly added pieces on that offense to make the Texans fans feel good that C.J. Stroud will continue to develop. But if he does happen to have a bit of a sophomore slump, I'd say don't count out the Colts in this division. I think they could have a chance, but I do see the Texans winning this division again and capturing the 2 seed in the AFC. All right, moving on then to the AFC West. It's a pretty straightforward division with who's going to finish first and even in my opinion who's going to finish in second. But even though this division appears to have an easy number one choice, we'll still go through it because that's why they play the game. So, anyways, feel like two teams are fighting for last place. No, I'll put the Raiders in last. It was between them and the Broncos, but for the Raiders, they just don't have a lot of talent, especially at the quarterback position. And the Broncos, I think they could with Bo Nix, but I'm not sure if he'll be quite what they want this particular year. Um, but he did show up in the preseason game against the Packers, so I guess you gotta give him his due credit for that. But at the end of the day, I don't really see either team as a true contender. But I'll put the Raiders in last, Broncos in third. I do think the Chargers I'll put in second. I think they'll improve quite a bit this year. Once again, a team like the Jets and the Bengals that dealt with injuries to their quarterback, to Justin Herbert. So we'll see if he can stay healthy this year. Of course, Jim Harbaugh coming in, bringing in some of the Michigan energy there. So I think they will sneak into the playoffs as the 7 seed. But at the end of the day, I'd be shocked if any of these teams, even they, competed with the Chiefs. As long as Patrick Mahomes is there and the defense continues to ball out like they did last year, they'll certainly be fine. And I actually think they might even have a historically good season, like maybe 14, 15 wins even. Knowing how because they were a bit iffy, especially offensively last year, and I think that Mahomes will build a lot more chemistry with his receivers, um, and the Chiefs will, in my opinion, comfortably get the number one seed in the AFC.
Yeah, this is a division that it can be frustrating that, all the big media personalities just kind of assume that the Chiefs are going to win everything. That's all you ever hear them talk about. But it's because it's true. Um, so with that said, I think the Raiders are going to finish last. Gardner Minshew could be a shot in the arm, but Minshew, like if those are your options, the quarterbacks aren't going to win them games. And I think that it's just going to be just a rough year for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think the Chargers will finish third. I think that the Chargers will have themselves an okay season. Obviously, they have the best quarterback of these three teams, but Justin Herbert has kind of stopped improving, you could say. He's where, in those first few years, he was up and up and up. Feels like it's plateaued a bit. I think that the Chargers just aren't a good enough team around him to compete for the playoffs if he isn't having a good season. I think that the Broncos will finish second. I really like Bo Nix. I don't know that he'll start right away, but I think that once he does, they'll start winning some games. And it's a Denver Broncos team that I think won't be able to challenge the Chiefs, won't even make the playoffs, but a Denver Broncos team that I just kind of feel more solid about than those other two. I feel like they have probably the lowest ceiling in this division, but also the highest floor of non-Chiefs teams. And then, of course, I have the Kansas City Chiefs, who are going to have a great regular season. There's no one to challenge them in the division. I think it's a Chiefs team that's going to at times feel like they're coasting, and then at times they'll put up 70 in the regular season. There's not much to say about them until it comes playoff time. It feels like.
Yeah, that's the Chiefs for the last 7 to 8 years. It feels like, if not more. I mean, they were really good with Alex Smith as well. But, anyways, let's move on to the other conference and probably the one that we care about more, knowing our team is there. The Packers are a part of it. But let's start with the NFC East division first. And I surprisingly for this division feel pretty good about who I have number one. Certainly, most people would vote for one of two teams for the number one, but I trust one quite a bit more than the other. So we'll get to that in a minute here. But in the meantime, let's start with the bottom two teams. And in last place, I do have the New York Giants. I mean, there really is not much hope in my eyes for Daniel Jones. I mean, he was really bad last year. Obviously, had the horrible pick six in their preseason game against Texans, and just in general, I think is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And it's definitely, I think that's an issue that's too much to ignore for the Giants for any positive thing they could have this season. And I really think they are significantly worse than who I have in third, who is the Commanders. And obviously, for the Commanders, they drafted Jaden Daniels second overall. He's a very talented quarterback, and I think he has potential to show that this season. However, I still don't really trust this team, especially defensively. I mean, they were probably the worst defense in a lot of categories last year. But, I do think there could finally be some hope in DC this year, especially maybe at the end of the year. I think they might get it going there at the end. But let's get to second place. And this is where it's probably a little controversial how I feel about this team. I have the Dallas Cowboys in second, but not only that, I really don't trust them to do much of anything this year. They always choke in the playoffs, but this season, I think in the regular season, it's going to be rough for the Cowboys. I think 8 or 9 wins is incoming. It's going to be an average season. Of course, you got like the CD Lamb contract issues, some Dak Prescott contract issues. This team just doesn't feel like they're fit together anymore. I mean, this is really their last ride, but I just don't see it ending all that good. So yeah, I think they won't have nearly as much regular season success this year. One team I do think will is who I have at number one, who's the Eagles. And despite their epic collapse at the end of last season, I think this team is still very good, well rounded. I think Jalen Hurts will bounce back. They still haven't banned the tush push, so that'll continue to be a dominant play for the Eagles. And I actually have them all the way up at the 2 seed this year. Big bounce back, I think, for Philly. There are, of course, some questions for their defense, but yeah, I think they will bounce back.
The NFC East, I won't even talk about the Giants. I feel like we'll bore ourselves to death, and also if we spend any more time talking about the Giants, you guys will all click off this video and discuss. So we won't even get into that. The Commanders, I have finishing third. They're not gonna be terrible, but they're not really going to compete with those top two teams, and they're also not going to come close to competing with the Giants for last. The Eagles, I have second, getting the sixth seed. I think that it's a team that's going to take a step back, rather even two steps back. I think it's a team that will have to refine their footing after last season, just refine their identity. I think teams will still kind of beat up on those same pressure points that caused that downfall last year, but I think it's an Eagles team that will get stronger as the year goes on. So that unfortunately does mean that another of those teams you can never hear enough about. The Dallas Cowboys, I have them as the 3 seed. It's a team that during the regular season always seems to be really good and always seems to give their fans and bandwagoners something to believe in just so that they can crush their spirits in the end. I think it's a Cowboys team that, when the pressure is off, is great. I think Mike McCarthy is a coach that, when the pressure is off, is great. I think that it's a team that, gets all the attention and all the love. And unfortunately, there's some good reason for that. I think they have a tendency to cause all the memes, to have all the trouble with the CeeDee Lambs, where they just kind of cause their own issues for attention, it feels like. But I think it's a team that, when it comes down to it, in the regular season, when they're playing 8 or 9 games at home, they just tend to take care of business.
All right, let's finally get into our division. The one we will be looking at each week, the standings, see where our Green Bay Packers land. Of course, that being the NFC North. Again, this is kind of one of those divisions that I see 3 teams that could legitimately contend for the playoffs. And in my opinion, one that kind of stands out that I'd be shocked if they contended. And if you can't figure that out yet already, I think that team is the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, the killer for the Vikings was the J.J. McCarthy injury in the preseason. So they're going to have to ride with Sam Darnold. And of course, we've seen that with the Jets. So I really don't see Sam Darnold improving much from that, even though he might have a little bit more talent on the Vikings teams than he did on the Jets. But yeah, I don't see the Vikings being much of a threat. Of course, let us know if you disagree, but for me, they seem like a pretty clear 4th place team. But this is the one division that I have where I have 3 teams actually making the playoffs, and that does include the Chicago Bears, who I unfortunately think will improve this season. I am buying into the Caleb Williams thing a little bit. I think that even though he's a rookie, he does have a lot of talent that I'm sure will be on display, at least to some extent, for the Bears this season. Obviously, he was the number 1 draft pick for the reason. Not only that, but he's been talked about as probably the best draft prospect since Andrew Luck. So obviously, the Bears have a lot of hope there, even though they've kind of been cursed at the quarterback position. And if they have added some other pieces on offense that definitely can give them some potential. So I would be surprised if they won the division, I suppose. But I have them as a 7th seed. I think they can certainly be a legitimate playoff threat. Now, in 2nd place, this could be a little biased because I don't have them in 1st place. But I do have the Detroit Lions in 2nd. I'm not a huge believer that Jared Goff will continue what he did last year. I think we saw like a similar story with the Rams where he had a couple good years and then just kind of completely fell off. Obviously, they have a lot of talent to win despite him, kind of like the Rams did. So I still think they can get the 5 seed in the NFC, but yeah, I would be surprised if we saw nearly as good of a Lions team as we did last year. And of course, that does in fact mean, biased or not, that I have the Green Bay Packers taking the NFC North once again. It's been a couple years, so well earned. I do have them as 3 seed this season. And of course, for me, with what we saw from Jordan Love at the end of the season, especially in the Cowboys game, that just has to give you a lot of hope for this upcoming season. I think we've improved this offseason. We got Xavier McKinney, got Josh Jacobs, some real talented pieces in positions of need. Many other moves as well. I just think it's going to be Jordan Love's time to shine. Obviously, he really showed up last year. I think that'll continue to happen. And I just got to hope that we can continue to grow from the greatness that we saw in the second half of last season.
I I have the division lining up a bit differently. I think that there is two classes of teams. Teams that will be competing for the division and the 2 seed, and the teams that will be competing to scratch and try to claw their way to the playoffs. Unlike you, I have zero faith in our neighbors to the south, the Chicago Bears. Every one of us knows that they always hype themselves up, how much they love to talk about their quarterbacks, how much they love to talk about how this is going to be the guy.
Yeah.
And while obviously Caleb Williams is better than Justin Fields, at least potential wise, look, it's his rookie year. He probably will turn out to be great. But I think that people forget just the struggle that initial season can be, right? We've seen it with, most quarterbacks. That it's really tough to jump in and lead a team. I might even love to believe the hype. Well, I wouldn't. Well, I don't love to believe the hype, and I don't because I've heard it all before. And I think that Williams will be great, but I don't think that's going to happen this season. And despite all the Vikings' flaws, I have them on top of the Bears. I do want to know what you guys think because obviously there's a lot of hype around the Bears, but I want to hear what non-Bears fans think, and so love to have y'all answer a poll in the comments about where y'all think the Bears are going to finish because I don't believe in them at all, but obviously there's many people who do. Most of them live in Illinois. With that said, the Vikings will finish third. They don't have that's their ceiling, obviously, with Sam Darnold and all the troubles they've had. I think that it's a Vikings team that will really compete with the top two. I have the Packers finishing second because I think that while we'll be better than last year, obviously, and while we're going to really start to find our stride, I do feel like it's a Lions team that's solid, and we forget because we get caught up in our own hype and how rightfully so how strong we are becoming and what a formidable threat we are. But that said, I think that the Lions are still the best team in this division on paper and over a 17-game season. But I think that it's a team that's solid and that's good enough for the 2 seed in the NFC.
All right, now let's move on from a division that may have two Super Bowl contenders, as we talked about, to a division that, well, let's just say it would be a surprise if anyone got anywhere near that far. Uh, let's look at the NFC South. I'll start with my last place team. Not much of a surprise at all here. The Carolina Panthers, I expect they will continue to struggle this year. Obviously, of course, last year they were the worst team. They won just 2 games, both in the last second. And they really aren't expected to become any type of contenders this year. I could see them improve a little bit. Believe it or not, I think they could get to around 5 wins, but as they still definitely feel like easily the worst team in this division. In third place, of course, this is where it starts to get a bit more interesting. I have the Buccaneers, the team that actually won the division last year. I think they'll take a little bit of a step back, maybe 7-8 wins this year. Obviously, last year Baker Mayfield really surprised a lot of people, but as we've seen with Baker, he's kind of had like a lot of times where he has one great year and then he goes back down to earth and becomes a pretty bad overall quarterback the next year. So I think that would again kind of could see that being the case this year, at least to some extent. So I think that the Bucks will take a bit of a step back to third. In second, I have the New Orleans Saints. I think the Saints are actually not getting as much talk for, in my opinion, not pretty much being on the same level as the uh, Bucks and the Falcons. I certainly don't think they'll be all that impressive this year, but I do expect. Well, I expect Derek Carr to be average, which for this division could possibly win it. But I don't think it'll quite be enough to win it, as I think the Falcons will play a bit better than average and get the division win. Obviously, their big move was getting a legitimate quarterback in Kirk Cousins, and they hope he can take this team to the next step. And I do think they will improve for sure in the regular season. I think this division is easily up for the taking. Obviously, they got Bijan Robinson, yeah, just a lot to like talent wise on this team. Now, I'd still say they're lacking as a team that can win the big game, especially with Kirk Cousins, but they definitely got enough talent to contend in this division.
Yeah, the NFC South is always a division that provides plenty of mediocrity, but mediocrity across the board, pretty much. That said, the Panthers obviously will only be able to dream of being mediocre. Carolina's bad. They're just bad. There's no real way to say it other than that. Obviously, you can look at the future, you can talk about their rebuilding and whatnot, but for this year, there's nothing there. This is a team that, if they play their cards wrong, they could end up being another team that doesn't win a game. It's just that kind of team. The Falcons, I have finishing third. It's a team probably is the most talented in this division that you have winning the division, and for good reason. But I feel like the NFC South never plays out the way you think it's gonna. I think that the Falcons failed to take that step forward. I think they have talented players. I think that they'll have great moments. But I do still think that they will finish third. I think the Buccaneers are a bit more proven. Obviously, their great run and Super Bowl came from an era, despite being only a few years old, long gone. But I think that Baker Mayfield, for all the overhype and all the stories throughout his career, I think that he's a solid quarterback and a quarterback that's good enough to get them not to the playoffs, but to second in the division. They might even sneak their way into that in the hunt graphic. And that leaves the New Orleans Saints. And that is because of two reasons, and two reasons only. And that's that Derek Carr is always average. He's never great. He's never terrible. He's Derek Carr, he's average. And with this defense, I feel like it's good enough. Again, not to do anything special. I don't mean to overhype them or make y'all pick them all in fantasy. But this feels like a team that's going to grind their way to victories.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely see the Saints as, a lot of people seem to be picking the Falcons or the Buccaneers in this division with their hype, but as I said, I think the Saints can contend as well, be right with those other two teams. So, yeah, but let's not waste any more time. Let's take a look at the final division, the NFC West. Mr. W, give us your thoughts.
I mean, this has kind of been a fun division. I think the Cardinals are going to finish last. I think they take a step forward, but they just won't be able to get out of the cellar. And that cellar might be 7 wins, but ultimately the Cardinals are, I feel, still the worst team in this division. I think the Seahawks will just miss out on the playoffs. They're one of those teams that is always hanging around, beats the bad teams, but never really will beat the good teams. I think that the Seahawks will just fall short over the 17-game season. They're a team that might lead the division for a while, might be last in the division for a while, but over the course of the year, I think we'll average out to the middle. I have the Rams finishing second, just squeaking into the playoffs with the 7th seed. I think that it's a team that will have recovered a bit more from that championship year when they went all out and they've kind of struggled. I think that they'll have bounced back a bit more from that. So I think this Rams team will will make the playoffs. I think that they're a team that you can count on that's solid. The 49ers, I think, will capture the 1 seed again. They're just too solid. While the Chiefs have their great dynasty going right now, the 49ers have their own strange little dynasty of being consistently good and consistently great until it comes time to play the Chiefs. So I think that the 49ers are going to run away with this division, maybe even the conference. Not to spoil things, but I don't see them going far.
All right. Well, I think the NFC West, I see it shaking out a little differently. I have the Seahawks in dropping to last place. I mean, Geno Smith, he was good his rookie year, not rookie year, his first year with Seattle. A little worse last year, but still solid. And I think he will continue to fall down a little bit, not a crazy amount, but enough. And also with the Seahawks, if you watched my NFL game winning touchdowns video, if you haven't checked that out, but you might have seen the Seahawks a lot. So I think they might not have maybe quite the same amount of luck in some of those games, and Geno will continue to become more the Geno that we remember. And well, I don't think it'll be a terrible year for Seattle. Without Pete Carroll the first time, I could see them drop a little bit. In third, now this is shocking just for the team I have ahead of them. I have the LA Rams in third. I have them just missing out on the playoffs, around 9-8, falling off a little from last year's peak, in my opinion. But they will certainly stay a contender as long as they're healthy. Puka Nakua, of course, bursting onto the scene last year. I think he'll continue to develop there. Um, all right, so you all are waiting for a crazy prediction, I'm sure. And here it is. I have the Arizona Cardinals, the 4-win Cardinals from a year ago, getting to second in this division and the 6th seed in the NFC.
Crazy. Please comment to let him know how crazy this thought is.
Well, I will say this. I like the Marvin Harrison Jr. draft pick. I think that will really allow the Cardinals offense to be much more explosive this year. They, of course, hopefully will have, for their sake, Kyler Murray for the whole year, and we saw certainly a better Cardinals team when they finally got him last year, for what that's worth. And also, just a quick thought: the Cardinals beat 3 playoff teams from a year ago, so if that's any indication, they can contend with some good teams in the NFL. I think all of this will continue to show, at least in some way this year, and will shock all of you as the Cardinals finally make the playoffs. But with that being said, even with my crazy Cardinals hype, yeah, it's still not enough for me to think they're close to the 49ers at number one. I think the Niners are obviously very talented across the board. I expect more of the same regular season success this year. But their big problem, of course, isn't the regular season. It's winning in the conference championship or Super Bowl when it really matters. But certainly no reason to think the Niners won't continue their success this year, as I have them as a top seed in the NFC. So, anyways, let's quickly go through our seeds here in the AFC and then in the NFC. So, I'll go first in the AFC. I have the Chargers as 7, Bills 6 seed, Ravens 5, Jets 4, Bengals at 3, Texans at 2, and Chiefs 1. And then in the NFC, I have Bears 7, Cardinals at 6, 5 the Lions, 4 the Falcons, 3 the Packers, 2 the Eagles, and 1 the 49ers once again.
Back to front in the AFC, I go Ravens, Jets, Bills, Texans, Bengals, Dolphins, and Chiefs. And in the NFC, back to front, I have the Rams, the Eagles, the Packers, the Saints, the Cowboys, the Lions, and the 49ers.
All right. On that note, let's go to the playoffs here. The best time of the year as a football fan, where teams you think shouldn't make runs at the Lombardi do just that. Even some seven seeds like last year. But yeah, let's see how we have this shaken out. So I'll start one of my wild card matchups. I have the Chargers and the Texans. I could actually see this as a good game for a 7-2 matchup, but I think the Texans have much less holes on their roster than the Chargers, especially at receivers. And yeah, I think they can ultimately come out on top here at home. But this is an interesting quarterback matchup, as all my wild card games in the AFC are, as you will see. Because next I have the 6 seed Bills going to Cincy to play the Bengals. And actually, this one might be my biggest wild card upset. Obviously, regardless, you have an elite quarterback on both sides of this matchup. But I think Josh Allen is actually a bit better than Joe Burrow. I feel pretty good about that. And I think the Bills will once again move on to the divisional round. And we'll see if they can finally get further. Um, I next have the 5 seeded Ravens against the 4 seeded Jets. Now, this one was pretty tough for me to pick. I kind of like both teams to have a chance here. But we have seen with the Ravens that obviously they've had a lot of struggles when it matters most in the playoffs. And I think, as I said earlier, Rodgers will be more than enough to put the Jets over the top as a contender in the AFC. And we'll get the job done in this 5-4 matchup. All right, let's move over to the NFC, starting with my 7-2 game, the Bears against the Eagles. This might be the easiest choice. While I, as I said, trust Caleb Williams to have a successful season, I don't really think he'll come close to winning a playoff game. Certainly against a team as talented as the Eagles. And I think the Eagles, I think they'll continue to want revenge from how last year ended. All right, then we get my Green Bay Packers, 3 seed, hosting a favorable matchup in the wild card round, the Cardinals at home. As I said, I do think the Cards will surprise a lot of you this year, but they're nothing to compete with Jordan Love and the Packers. At least I got to think I can trust the Packers to win this game, ideally fairly easily. But whatever gets the job done, I suppose. And then finally, I have the Lions traveling to Atlanta. You've got Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins, who've played each other now a good amount in the NFC North. I got to give it to the Lions here. I think, they've been here before. I don't think they'll be, as I said, quite the dominant force they were a year ago, but I think I can trust them to get past the Falcons here and move on to the divisional round. So now let's take a look at Mr. W's wild card round.
Let's start 2-7 in the AFC. I have the Dolphins taking on the Ravens. This is a Dolphins team that it's always fun to watch until it becomes playoff time, and then they have a way of shutting down. And that said, I feel like that's where Lamar Jackson really does tend to make a difference. Obviously, they haven't had incredible playoff success. I think this is the year. Not that they do anything crazy, but I feel like this Ravens team will make the divisional round, especially in this hypothetical matchup. They pull the ultimate upset.
7-2 upset.
Yeah. I have the 3 seed Bengals beating the 6 seed Jets. I'm just not sold on the Jets. I know they have some great pieces around Aaron Rodgers, but I would kind of be shocked if Aaron Rodgers is still healthy at this point. I think that the Bengals are just more solid. Which then these are 2 teams that finished very poorly last year. But I think that the Bengals will be good enough to win a game at home. 4-5 Texans Bills. I have the Texans. I think that this is a Bills team that always finds a way to lose close games. I mean, I'm really high on CJ Stroud, and maybe too high. Maybe I'll be wrong, but it doesn't feel like it to me. It doesn't feel like the that the Texans are a team that's just gonna bow out like Texans teams in the past have at this point. Over the NFC, Lions, Rams. The Lions are gonna win, same as they did last year. I think it's a fun game for the storyline for the media, but I think that football wise, this Lions team is way better. 3-6. I have maybe it's biased, but it's also built on facts. I have the Eagles beating the Cowboys. It's an upset by my seeds, but the Cowboys losing in January, is it? Can you really call it an upset? I think that this is an Eagles team that, while they collapsed last year, that's just way more solid. And Mike McCarthy will do what they do best, and they'll choke this one away. 4-5 Saints Packers. My matchup for the Packers isn't quite as green and gold friendly as yours is. The Saints are a team, like you mentioned, that NFC South team. Despite what the Buccaneers did last year, you can't trust them to win playoff games, and I don't. I trust us, green and gold, rolling on to the divisional round.
Okay, time to look at our divisional rounds. I'll once again lead off here. Of course, 8 teams remain now in the playoffs. Usually it's the best of the best, and it's pretty much what I have here, with obviously a couple of upsets in the AFC. Matchup we're used to. I have the Bills playing the Chiefs in Arrowhead once again, this time as a 6-1 game. And I'd like to have faith in the Bills that they could get the job done here, but I don't really see how now they can finally beat the Chiefs. As I said, I think the Chiefs will just be one of the most dominant teams in recent memory, and they will survive the Bills. I do think it'll be close. But yeah, Mahomes just always seems to have the leg up in this matchup. Then we get the other AFC game, the 4-2 game, the Jets versus the Texans. And this is certainly two less typical playoff suspects, but two teams that I definitely could see make a run at the big prize. This one, like the Jets wild card game, I think it's quite a toss up, but I'm actually picking another upset here. I'm picking the Jets to advance once again. I keep saying I think this defense can really, defense wins championships. Well, if nothing else, I think the Jets defense can really get them on a run. Let's go back to the NFC. I have a rematch of the NFC Championship here in the divisional as a 5-1 game, the Lions and the 49ers. And while it's tough to trust the Niners in the biggest of moments, they do tend to win in at least the divisional round. And I don't really see the Lions as nearly what the threat that they were last year. So I do have San Fran moving on. And finally, what I think would be the most interesting game, possibly the entire week, I have the 3 seeded Packers at the 2 seed Eagles. I think no matter what, with this type of game, it'll come down to the wire. Of course, 2 great quarterbacks, great offenses, and possibly some potential for both their defenses. But while it might be biased, you know what? I'll keep my Packers playoff run going. I think the Eagles, while they will improve from the end of last year, that stretch of game just gave me so many questions and how real of contenders they are. And even if they do improve, I think the Packers are more poised now to get on a run than the Eagles.
Kick off my divisional round. 1-7 in the AFC, Chiefs and Ravens. Well, it's a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game, and I think that this one will go the same way. I think that the 1 seed Chiefs advance. I'm gonna go over to my 3-4, my Bengals Texans, two non-traditional playoff teams, if you will, or at least powerhouses, division winners. But two teams capable of upsets, as one of them has proven, and I believe one of them will prove. I think this is the Texans' year to really roll come playoff time. Again, I'm really high on CJ Stroud. So I have the Chiefs and the Texans moving on. Over in the NFC, 49ers and Eagles in the 1-6. Even though they're the 6th seed, I do feel like this Eagles team will have it figured out. I feel like they have to have learned something from last year. I think that this 49ers team is good enough to always be in games in the playoffs, but I think as we saw in the divisional round last year, that they have flaws, and that ultimately, if you can be great on that given day, you can beat them. And I think that those same weaknesses show again, and this time against, forgive me, a better Eagles team than we were a year ago. Certainly more experienced, and, even talented on paper. I think that the Eagles take advantage and move on. In the 2-5 game, Lions and Packers, over the course of a 17-game season, I think the Lions will be better. But when it comes to January football, when it's cold, even if it's in their stupid dome, who would you rather have? Jordan Love or Jared Goff?
Yeah,
I'd rather have Jordan Love.
I definitely am fine with Jordan Love.
And look, this is a Packers team that now has been there, right? We've been to the divisional. And I think that this time we'll pull it off. I think that this is a vulnerable Lions team that when the pressure is put on, I feel like LaFleur is the better coach. I feel like we have the better defense. I feel like we have the better skill positions. I feel like we have the better quarterback. This is a Lions team that I think is solid, but I feel like this is a team that we should handle. So with that said, I have the Eagles and the Packers making the NFC Championship.
Same matchup as my divisional round. We'll see how Mr. W sees how that matchup between the Packers and Eagles goes down in the NFC. But let's start with my championship predictions. And believe it or not, I have both games resulting in an upset. Crazy once again. We'll start with 49ers Packers. And of course, as a Packers fan, this one I feel a little better about. I think, we were so close last year to finally knocking off the Niners, just a few plays away. And I think we are very capable after the playoff experience of making those plays and finally getting back to the Super Bowl. How incredible it would be if we could do that. The other game, Jets Chiefs. Now, this one is even more of a shot at a dartboard than Packers Niners, in my opinion. But I do keep saying I really think this Jets defense is something special. And I even think they have a chance of slowing down a QB like Mahomes, as great as he is. And I think Rodgers will do his thing, and the Jets will do what they really hoped to do last year. Who knows? Maybe they would have if Rodgers would have stayed healthy. No one can predict that stuff, but of course, that is going to the Super Bowl. So I have the matchup that I'm sure all you fans would love to see. Rodgers against his old team, Jets versus Packers.
That would be that would be amazing. And I think that if that does happen, now that he's spoken it into existence, I feel like if that does happen, we all owe Mr. M here a thank you, maybe a gift basket. I think that would be truly, as a Packers fan, as long as it went our way, the greatest possible matchup. I, however, have this taking a darker turn. I have the Eagles beating us. Call it trauma, call it whatever you want, but I think that this is a Packers team that, while they're ready to take that next step and really be a challenger throughout the year, I don't feel like this is a team that's ready to go to the Super Bowl. The NFC Championship game is the abusive boyfriend that we all keep going back to. We always get our hopes up, and unfortunately, I don't see this one going our way. I think that the Eagles are too solid of a team. So I do see the Eagles beating us. Over on the other side, I have the Chiefs and the Texans. I mean, I'm a bit of a broken record here, but I'm really high on CJ Stroud. I think people are underrating these Texans. I think they'll even jump out to a big lead. I think we've seen this movie before, right? Seen it happen. Playoffs in, playoffs out. The Chiefs don't always come out of the gate quick. However, we've seen it before. We've seen what this Chiefs team does. We've seen how they do it at this time of year, and I think they do it again. I think this Chiefs team is inevitable, and that no matter how dead in the water you think they are, the football gods just really love them, and I think that I would be first in line to be cheering if this doesn't happen. But I think the Chiefs are going back to the Super Bowl. I think that while I would love to sit here and say that the Texans are my pick, I think that we maybe we've been beaten into this sort of mindset, but
Yeah.
I think that none of us would be shocked.
Yeah, certainly you can never count out the Chiefs. I mean, I think that's pretty clear at this point. I would trust them hypothetically to beat the Jets in my matchup, but obviously, just for the sake of predictions and to be a little different, I took that game a different route. But I mean, certainly, I don't think anyone would be surprised if the Chiefs went back to the Super Bowl.
They bring out the cynic in all of us, right? Where at this point we're all tired of them, but they just won't go away.
Yep. All right. So let's get to the Super Bowl. That, for me, the Super Bowl we all will be hoping to see for some kind of reason. That, of course, being Jets versus Packers. Now, I kind of have the Jets going on a bit of a run. I'm not sure how much faith I have in it, especially since we've barely seen what Rodgers can actually do there. But obviously, it's a very talented roster. For this game, I just think the playoff experience is very important. Packers, of course, couple games. Jets still haven't made it at all since 2010. And of course, Jordan Love. Nothing more to say, but that he was the best quarterback in football in the second half of the season. So, for these reasons, I have the Super Bowl finally going back to Titletown in the 2024-25 season.
Woo! If this happens, we all owe you one. I think that would be so great. I think that it's not outside the realm of possibility. However, while our friend over here is certainly the optimist and hopefully will be proven right, I unfortunately will play the role of the cynic, the devil's advocate, because I have the Chiefs and the Eagles. The rest of the team is pretty much the same level of the Eagles, but I do think it's a better quarterback situation. I think as much as it will hurt every one of us when it happens, and we'll all be tired of it as we are right now. I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl again this year. I think that they're still just the best team. They certainly are the new dynasty, and I don't see this being the year that they fall backwards. I think they'll obviously take that step during the regular season and be more dominant. I certainly don't enjoy being this guy, the one who takes the favorite, but I think that if you are in a state with legal sports betting, I think that if you're going to spend money on taking an NFL championship, ultimately that would be your safest bet.
Yeah, that certainly wouldn't surprise anybody. Hopefully it's the Packers here to get on a run, but definitely it'd be shocking just to not see the Chiefs there in at least one of the last few games of the season. But regardless, these were our 100% correct predictions for the upcoming season. Of course, like and subscribe if you are new, and comment if you disagree on anything, or even if you happen to agree on our predictions. It'd be nice to give us a little shout out there, but whatever suits you best. And of course, be on alert for future videos.
But of course, mostly feel free to comment and let him know what he got wrong let him know how ridiculous his Cardinals pick was, and me as well. You know, I'm no I can't see into the future. So if any of you out there have crystal balls, please enlighten us. It's now the nearing the end of August, which means that the Green Bay Packers run to New Orleans will start very soon.